Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special episode of the Canary Room. We are on the road again in the beautiful, the beautiful West Yorkshire countryside with a man who needs no introduction. It is, of course, Mr. Terry Kelly, a man who is single-handedly responsible for my love, introduction, passion for Fife Canary. So, Terry, it's all your fault. And Terry, thank you so much for I was going to say inviting us round, but once again, I've invited myself.
No. You're very welcome.
I've invited myself.
It's always a pleasure to see you.
Oh, bless you. This is one of those moments where you I've never been to Terry's before. I've seen Terry's videos. I've read Terry's book cover to cover about 1 million times. But when you're actually here. The place is incredible. I mean, the garden is beautiful as we sat here. Chaffinches and robins and goldies and the like are all on Terry's feeders, and he has a couple of small lakes as well. Small lake. I mean, some people might call them ornamental ponds. I'm calling them lakes. So, Terry, appreciate your time very much.
Pleasure.
It's wonderful to be here. So, the Fife Canary. It's a stunning bird. But where did your love of birds begin?
Round about 1853, I think was. I remember going to Dewsbury Market in 1853 and seeing bullfinches. And that was my first birds. I bought a pair of bullfinches. And even today, I see myself as a British man rather than a Canary man. I don't know why. After all these years, it's 20, 30 years since I kept British, and I've had the Fifes 30 years. But like yesterday, I was sent early. A cock bullfinch landed on that yew tree yesterday, and for 2 pence, now I know you keep bullfinches. The Fifes might have a shorter life than I expected. So those youngsters you were talking about, I'll have a pair of those. So yes,
I'm sure we'll sort that out.
It was the British, and in those days, you've got to admit, there were wild caught. You didn't realise at the time, but there were wild caught. And I got obsessed with British finches, and I built aviaries. My main aviary was about 24 foot by 12 by 8. And the thing was, it was just building a bit of nature. Filling it full of conifers and laurels and little water features, and it was just creating a thing of beauty. Then you put your bullfinches in and your greenfinches and your siskins, and I was obsessed with the British birds. I never showed a British bird. I kept British birds 30 years. Showing has never been the big thing with me. I just wanted to see them in my garden and enjoy them. And I went to see Tommy Patterson 40 years ago. Great British man, Tommy. And he had these little canaries. So what are those? And he referred to them as the Scottish borders. And Tommy used to clean the cages out for Jimmy Moffat. I'm sure a lot of people watching this won't have heard of Jimmy Moffat, but he was the man 40, 50 years ago. He had great birds. And I said, next time you go to Scotland, bring me a few birds out. And he did. And at the time, I was breeding millet poles. I remember one nest at about 7, so I took some millet poles and put them under the Fifes. And I took the smallest millet poles and put them under the Fifes. And then a few days later, the Fife poles were bigger than the millet poles, and I used them as fosters, they are great, and people do today use them as fosters. But suddenly, the love of, because I've always liked the Phil Warren's borders, the shape of that bird, and I thought I just started breeding them, and that took over. Now, when I came here 30 years ago, the intention was to build aviaries and keep me British again. But my father came once and there were bullfinches, goldfinches. He said, well, you don't need an aviary here. Just enjoy these. And I never got round to it, even though I see myself as a British man. When I get the cage birds every week, I'll look at the back, British birds for sale. I will look for bullfinches. I'm never going to buy it. No, I found yours. I don't need to buy anymore. So I thought the one day I will. When it all started, Dewsbury Market in 1853, with this one pair of bullfinches, I can see me going back and just dabbling in it. I just adore the bullfinch. When it lands here, I see a cock. I think that's the most beautiful thing. So yeah, and the Fifes took over, and then I've never been into showing, but I thought I looked at some of the Fifes at the shows and thought these are, I'll get some of these, and and that's how it started. And I built a good lineup, and then I wanted a little bit better. I thought I am quite competitive when it comes to tennis and table tennis, and that kicked in. I'm sure you are, Matt. When you start showing, well, you might as well breed good birds to show. And my turning point, I think it was about 1983. A guy called Willie Turnbull. I hope you're watching this, Willie. Salt of the earth, great guy. He bred greens, nothing but greens. They were fantastic. And so when you come down to north of England, bring me a good green yellow cock. So I came to the north of England with Willie, great birds, and I said, have you got me that green yellow cock? And he said, yeah, it's there. It was first in a class of 25. I said, you don't mean that one? He says, yeah. There was more of a camaraderie than those days. You take that. Thank you. But the following year, the year after, I got my own back on Willie Turnbull. Because I went to Scotland to the Fife show, and I had best opposite sex with a green buff cock, covered in rosettes. And Willie said, have you got a nice green buff cock you can let me have? I thought, right, here, that. Not that one. He says, yeah. It was the grandson or the son of the one he gave me. And he insisted that taking the rosettes off. I said, no, it's that bird. Take the rosettes, take the bird. And that was the start of it. I think then in 87, 88, I swept the board with the greens. And it was due to that one bird that I reckon was the best outcross I ever got. And it put my greens on a new level. Now, a plug for this kind gentleman. The second best outcross I ever got was a green buff hen, which was a mind-blowing bird. At the north of England, the judges were looking at the best Fife, a little cinnamon, a little white. But this green buff hen weren't in the same league as this green buff hen. And I got a couple of youngsters out of that hen, which are the basis of all those greens in there. And that bird came from Mr. Matt Eld. Is that what you wanted him to say?
I'll just give him the cash now. Terry has always been very generous with his kindness, and one of the things I will say that there is, as always with great stories, there's an element of truth in that. Terry did take a bird from me.
It was lovely,
and it was a real. It was one of those moments for me. I knew. When someone who'd had the experience Terry had and the success Terry had and the passion for birds, I knew that I was doing something right. When the master came to the apprentice and said, I like that, how about that? So Terry, the room itself is it is stunning. It is one of, and I've been very lucky enough to see a number of great bird rooms. It is up there with the greatest bird rooms I've seen. It's a beautiful room to look at visually. It just nestles in the garden, and it's lovely. So, you were saying before it's around about what 20 by 12.
I think, yes, about maybe slightly more, maybe 22 by 12 by about 7 feet high. Quite. The thing is, I've never known anybody build an aviary and said they wish they'd made it smaller. That's how I ended up with my aviary, 24 by 12 by 8. You always want a bit more space. So this was my second attempt. So when I built this, I thought, yes, make it that bit bigger. You can always use extra space in a bird room, hot water, sink. So I thought, this is my last bird room, and I'll do it right. And yes, it's
and it most certainly is right. So without further ado, if we Well, let's go and have a look at Terry in his room. Right, so we've made it into the room, and it's one of those things, you know, you see these things on movie sets or Terry's DVDs, and I walked in here and I was like, oh, I feel like I've been here before. I haven't. I have seen Terry's DVDs and videos. So Terry, we're in your room now. I'm gonna be naturally quiet because I'm a naturally quiet and shy.
Yes, I've known that many years, Matt. Yes,
kind of guy, and there are birds on eggs, and there are birds and young in the nest as well. So, Terry, the cage configuration in here is a stockman's room. This, so you've got you can tell that from the moment you walk in. You know, you've got the row here behind us of 5 cages where you've got the trebles,
yes,
and then a couple of doubles at the end, and then obviously you've got the big flight cages at the back there where the young are going to go into. So.
Hopefully.
Yeah, well, they're all already young in the room. Although the bionic man, as we're calling him now, has been a little bit later this year breeding, haven't you? So with the clear birds, you're running them in. There's an order in the room, isn't there, Terry?
Yes,
and that's important to you.
Well, it really, the order is determined by the cages. Now, these cages, they're about 50 years old now, these cages. They were made in blocks of 5. I don't know why they made them in blocks of 5 to run a treble there and a pair there. I mean, some people run a cock with 5 and 6 hens. I can't be doing with that. It's time consuming. Ideally, I think pairs, you've no problems with pairs. You don't take an attachment to one or the other. So, yeah, I'd run a treble and a pair, and if I've got an old cock like that old cock there that's 5 or 6 years old, I can't run in with several hens, so I'm just running it as a pair. So my best birds, like there's 2 clear yellow cocks there which are over year birds, that automatically I'll choose the best 4 buff hens, flighted or unflighted, to go with them, and the second division, if you like, will get as a pair. So, and the same here with the buff cocks. The best 2 buff cocks, young birds, will get the best 4 yellow hens, and then they also runs an old bird over there will as a pair. So I tend to dominate 2 clear buff cocks, 2 clear yellow cocks, and the best 4 buff hens and yellows will go with them. And I don't like this. I've tried occasionally running it with 3 cocks, but it's messy, time consuming. And I also maintain that every one of these birds is related to every other one. So if you brought a new cock in, like a fill-warm board, I can understand running that with 6 hens, but every one of those is related, and occasionally, like the second division pair down there, will produce, this happened a few years ago, the best youngsters. And I checked, and they both have the same grandmother, which was the best clear at the North Wales, and I hadn't realised that until I started to look at why are these so good. So, yeah, I don't need to run it with 2 or 3 because, as I say, everyone. And when I bring an outcross in, it's usually from someone who's had birds from me, so there's no dramatic change. So that's nice.
And I think that's part of the important thing, isn't it? That outcross, sometimes you get it for the fresh blood, but you almost want an outcross within your lines.
Absolutely, you do. It makes life easier. I mean, like your outcross, maybe your outcross wasn't totally unrelated to mine because there was obviously a lot of Gerald in there. So when I got your outcross from you, there was some Spencer in them both, and it worked beautifully. That's it.
Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. So we've got the dark birds on this side of the room. So similar principle there as well.
Really. Yeah. Yes. So blocks of 5. Same again. God, these cages are so. I must get some new plastic cages. These are dropping, falling apart. Yeah. It's treble there, double there. Exactly the same cages over there. I breed less greens these days. I don't breed the cinnamons and the white because you can just go on forever. I like to have a quality line of greens and a quality line of clears, and it just suits me for some reason to have the clears this side and the greens that side. Nice and simple.
It's order. I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for order in the room here, aren't we? It's one of those things. I think there's a touch of OCD in all of us just to keep our birds just absolutely bang on. Yeah. Wonderful stuff. And we talk about the room, Terry. It's It's a proper room, isn't it? You've got your water at the end. You've got everything, and you've got space, which is something I don't have.
No, well, that's right. I think the bigger the room, the better. You cannot have too much space. I've always said, if we get rid of the birds, I'll rent this as a holiday cottage in the home valley. I'll probably make more money out of that than I get out of the Canaries. It just lends. Or a granny flat. Or if Pam ever divorces me, I can just get my telly in the corner and watch Manchester United, and that'll be done.
Don't give Pam any ideas. Don't give Pam any ideas.
She's already got them, so don't.
Yeah. So Terry, you talked about your the clear birds and the clear lines you've got, and we've got 4 really nice typey clear yellow cocks here with their respective partners. So this is obviously something that you've been. I mean, the lines you can trace back, I guess, till Adam was
1853.
And with these particular birds, they've caught your eye, and the part is it all about visual quality, or is it as much about pedigree, or is it the combination of both?
It's pedigree. If I cannot decide, I'll line up, say, 8 clear yellow cocks, and I'm going to keep 2 unflighted and 2 flighted. So I'll look at the 8. If those 2 leap out, I will take those 2. If the second and third, I'm not quite sure, but the third or even the fourth was out of the clear buff end that was best clear north of England, I will take that. Because I know people have said before, that isn't as good as the bird you're selling. But yes, I know in theory it will breed a better bird. Even though you're buying that is better than what I'm keeping. The pedigree tells me that will do a better job. So in the main, it's visual. And the first thing I do, people have seen the DVDs, when I select the birds I'm keeping, I put them all on the floor and look at that from above. I've often thought if I go judge a little show and there's not much birds, I'll tell the stewards to put them all on the floor, and I'll judge. That is the main thing. If they haven't got that 40% of the, I don't want to know. If they haven't got the shoulders, they go. So genetically, it's what they look like. Mainly from above. The next thing is that break on the neck. And the third thing I look for is the neat wings. I see a lot of birds at shows that the front half is great and the back half isn't so clever, but it's one of the class. Whereas I tend to look at the neat wings and the overall shape. So
I think that sort of over the top of the birds is really important. It's the reason we have an all-wire cage.
It is absolutely.
You can see sort of over there.
I like to look down, and then if they haven't the shoulders, they're away. That's the first thing I look for. Then the break in the neck and the wing. There are lots of other things like the position, all the rest of it. You can go on forever. But there's 3 things that I look for when I'm judging or whether I'm keeping. It's those 3. And these 2 clear yellow cocks, I always keep in the main. I say always. These are 2 over-year birds, which did the business for me last year. 2 nice cocks. And then I've 2 unflighted. That's an unflighted. They're pulling a little bit, obviously, in the breeding season, but these were round as cannonballs on the children. And a one over there, which is a cinnamon carrier, accidental cinnamon carrier. I don't keep cinnamons, it happened to be a cinnamon carrier, and it'll throw the odd red eye in there, but in the main, I don't keep cinnamon. It just happens to be a cinnamon. So those are the 4 clear yellow cocks, 2 1-year-old and 2.
And there's a real sort of focus, isn't there, in terms of that balance between the flighted and the unflighted bird, because the flighted, we know, gives us that sort of that trust. We know what it can do. We know it can fill eggs, and we've seen what it can produce. And then obviously with the unflighted, there's always that bit of unknown.
There is, yes. But the flighted, and the cock there singing its head off, that was part of a pair. Now that cock died, so I'm running that now as a trio. Now look at, that the flighted bird, pull the position out, will do the business. Now an unflighted bird that I'd run as a pair then suddenly halfway through the breeding season, wanted to run as a trio, wouldn't be as straightforward.
Yeah.
You can hear that singing now.
Yeah.
That bird knows it's going to go with that other one, and you know they'll fill eggs, and you know they will run with 2 or 3. Once they've done it, it's so there's a big advantage there.
Yeah.
And there's the odd bird. There's a clear buff cock there that's a few years old, and a green buff cock down there that I'll keep until they drop dead. You know, they're on top drawer, and they will fill, and I'll keep them till forever and a day. They might outlive me, some of them.
It's a possibility. Terry said to me before, there's a buff cock over there, it's 6 years old, and I was looking like that thinking, it's 6 years old, really? And it's still filling eggs. Okay, so there's life in them as well, it seems. There's life in them as well. Brilliant stuff. So we are, as we've said, we're in the middle of the breeding season. We've flipped the camera around now so we can see Terry's greens behind us. And Terry, we'd be forgiven for thinking, as when we were in Keith Ferry's room a couple of weeks ago and I looked at the pegs and his, we'd be forgiven for thinking that you how do we care, stalwarts of the fancy. You've got this trick about pegs, so I can see similar coloured pegs in this room here. So come on, talk us through your peg approach.
Yeah, it's strange. I was talking to Keith Ferry several years ago in Europe, and I was telling him what I do, make it streamline. When a hen lays an egg, I put a yellow peg, and when I set the clutch, I put a blue peg there, and when it's due to hatch, I put a red peg there. And Keith Ferry, funnily enough, he did exactly the same and uses the same bloody colours. So
there's something going on here.
It makes life easier. When I look through, I know all those blue pegs, those are hens that sat on eggs, don't need any extra, don't give any extra greens, any extra soft food. And when I top up the seed, they don't need to grate. So just every couple of days, just top up a little bit of seed, whereas your red pegs, you know that they need the special treatment. So it makes life easier when you've... I'm the biggest stud in the world, but I've enough to... You can make it a bind. So when I'm coming in the morning, especially when I was working, I can ignore the blue pegs, get on the red pegs, and it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah. And one of the red peg chicks hens over there before, you gave some... you gave some spinach from, but when we talk about fresh spinach, let's not kid ourselves that anybody has anything fresher than Mr. Kelly here, because I've got a shot actually of it. I've got a shot of the spinach garden. So Terry says very kindly, yeah, Pam grows me the spinach. And it's grown, and you're giving that straight to the birds.
I do.
Yeah.
Cage number 24 down there, those are due to hatch tomorrow. Before you arrived, I saw that there was 3 of them are hatched already. So the first thing I do is get a leaf of spinach, wash it, and give it in there, and the hen will go to the spinach. And within minutes of it hatching, at first, when I did this years ago, I thought, oh my God, the crop was green. I thought, there's too much there, but no, it's no problem. And you cannot get fresher than that. You can buy bags of spinach in the supermarket, but no, Pam grows me this every year. So for the first few days, they get spinach that is minutes old straight in, and then I move on to the broccoli. But I love the spinach grown like that. It's you can't get better than that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're going to have a little look now, because behind Terry, just out of shot at the moment, is a set of staging that would grace the finest of shows, and it currently houses Terry's weaning bird. So we'll have a little look at that right now. So Terry, this is was this your carpentry skills that put this together? Just say yes. Yes, it was. Look, Terry built this himself. He cut the trees down, he planed the wood and everything else. I mean, this is... we talked earlier on about the room and the space in the room, but this is an important bit of kit, isn't it, to enable you to see the birds, a selection process, but also you're weaning the young here.
Yes, we designed this to be like, this is very similar to a show. That's good for storage down there, but this here is the sort of thing you get at a show. 7 on the top, 7 there, 7 here. So it is nice to, when I'm assessing which birds I'm keeping, to line them up and judge them as I would judge a show. But it's also ideal for Weaning. Now these are training cages. I've got 24 of these bought from Oscar Marriott. People may not have heard of Oscar Marriott.
I've heard the name.
Oscar Marriott, he provided all my show cages. My show cages are nearly 40 years old. They're all from Oscar Marriott, and I've never painted them. He used to hand paint them 4 coats, so they just get washed, and that's it. Never need to paint them. These are the same solid training cages. Take it away from the parents. The secret with weaning youngsters is not to give them a perch, because they'll sit on the perch and call. These went in here with soft food on the floor. Once they start picking up, I'll put a perching and the soft food they will get. They will also get a piece of apple dipped in Quaker tonic. Another day, especially for making rhubarb crumble for Matt Eld for his lunch, I have some.
Can't wait.
I bought some oranges. So cut that into 4, dip it in the Quaker tonic, and they'll start picking. If you've youngsters that won't pick up, give it apple. Or there's more moisture in the orange. So once they start eating the orange, they start eating and they get the moisture. So that's so yeah. Apple, orange, green food, and these training cages. Now they're on the perch. They're feeding. Tomorrow, there's about 20 there. The first few, I will catch them up, bring them, and put them in one of those flights.
Into the cages there.
Into the big cage, the flights.
Yeah.
And they'll stay there until September, October, until I decide which I'm going to keep.
Yeah. And then you'll pull them out and go through the process, the selection process.
Steady them down, put them on the floor, and then even though you're not going to show them all, you need them steady. When people come, they want to see a good steady round bird.
Yeah.
A bird that's all over the place. It's a different bird. It's not a fife, is it?
No.
So
No,
these 24 weaning cages are fabulous. They'll sit on here and wean the youngsters. Once they're feeding away like that, you see that's home and dry now. So that can be ringed. And that'll be a nice little buff hen, I think. That can be weaned and into there. Same with these.
Fabulous stuff. So we've got again a slightly different thing. I've never seen the sort of weaning. I've obviously seen it because I've seen it on your videos, but prior to that, I'd never seen it in these cages, and that it makes a lot of sense. It's a really good setup. Super stuff. So this is all very civilized, Terry, isn't it? We've retired now to the the beautiful part of the garden where we can see everything, and Terry's very kindly had us little beer. So cheers, Terry. I'll have a
cheers, Matt. Put it on, is lovely.
Just to just to lubricate the larynx more than anything else, just when I start talking. Now, Terry, you were, I mentioned it at the outset of the show, an inspiration for many taking up the hobby, and that was down to your collection of videos, your book, and then the DVDs that you did, and a real inspiration for the Canary Room as a channel. So again, I'm blaming you for that. I thought the idea of capturing the hobby, and obviously we live on a YouTube platform now, to try and show how really enjoyable, rewarding, and bloody frustrating at times it can be, but it is for everyone. So the book, it was it is the Bible of certainly canary keeping, but certainly Fife canary keeping, and it wasn't the first one you'd authored, was it?
No. A guy called James Blake wrote to me, 20 odd years ago, and asked if I would make a contribution to his book. What James Blake did, he produced a book on the Gloucester, a book on the Norwich, and a book on the Fife. And the first 90% was the same for each book. Was it Ken Gregg? It was one of the top Norwich men did a contribution. So it was the same book, but only a small percentage was on the Fife. So I never thought of writing a book until he came along and asked me if I would do it based on my articles in Cage Birds. So I did that, and then I thought afterwards, this isn't good enough really. And people were saying, "Are you going to make another?" And I thought, well, yes, I set about it, and it takes longer than you think. Yeah, it went to my secretary at the Chamber of Commerce. Fortunately, I've left. She spent more time on the book than she did on Chamber of Commerce business, because there's 50,000 words in the book. That's a lot, and you don't just sit down and write it, as you know with what you're doing here, Mark. You know, there's 50,000. You probably write 60, 70. You change it. You go back, and it took me a year. I think it was published in the year 2000. The book, and it went well. And then people were saying, why do you do a video? I mean, I have to earn a living, you know, besides. So yes, on not too much pressure, I thought, yes, I will. I came to a deal with a guy called Simon Leelman in the village. He said, it is expensive. It is very expensive making videos. So we came and said, well, look, let's have a go, and we'll share the profit. And he said, fine. Otherwise, you'll be spending thousands of pounds to have a video produced, and you may not get half your money back. I haven't made any money, but at least I haven't lost any. But it was good to do that. So yes, we did the video 1, 2, and 3, and then people wanted the DVDs. So I produced the DVD 4 based on that clay buff hen that won the North of England and the green yellow cock, and then the videos were getting old hat. So I produced a DVD 5, which was really the best of the 3 videos. So someone's starting, because people email me, can they have DVD 1, 2, and 3? And I have to explain. But for a novice, someone starting up with any Canary or 5, DVD 5 is the one that's 3 hours. It's the basic stuff on it. As a DV4 is a bit specialised on exhibiting, but for a novice, someone starting up, these DVDs go all over the world, and the praise I get back is quite embarrassing in a way. They see it as without, you know. I wish someone had given me this book in 1853. You know, when I bought my first pair of bullfinches, because I fed them on hard, dry seed, which was a recipe for disaster. You know, with bullfinches, you need the soft food, but nobody told me in 1853 you bought them off the market, which was criminal in some ways. Nobody told you how to look after them. So yes, people. I'm glad it helps newcomers, which is the main reason for it. And yeah.
I think it does, and I think I'll take the opportunity, probably on everybody's behalf, of thanking you for doing it, because I know I'm actually authoring a book at the moment, Terry. I might ask you to do the foreword for it.
I will do.
But I know the amount of time and then the photography, and the Fife's a beautiful bird, isn't it? But the bloody thing will not sit still to be photographed. So I think
it's like that photograph there. It must have spent hours. That's not perfect, but you take the shot. You've got, why have I got an empty perch? It's just, no, it's not easy.
Trying to get these things done is not easy at all. So, you've done the books, you've done the films. I think the Canaries, it's probably fair to say, have taken you through judging engagements across the world. Very little left for you to win on the show bench that you haven't won. 5 times North of England winner, which was at that stage and still remains one of the premier shows in the UK. Exhibiting wise, it's you've still got that competitive spirit. I know that. I can see that glint in your eye. But it's not something from an exhibiting side of things now that you're massively keen on.
It's really the question of time. You know, when you're working, you've got a certain amount of time for holidays and things, and you do accommodate your hobbies and things. Now it's just, it isn't like going to the north of England, North West, or the North Wales. What people don't realise, I'm sure, champions do, it's the hundreds of hours preparing that bird. You don't win the national exhibition by taking a bird along. It's man hours training it, sorting it out, and getting it perfect, because a bird has 2 shapes. You know, when it sits like that, it sits like that, and then it moves or is unsteady. So it's the preparation. And also, I'm judging quite a bit, and also our visitors from abroad, Stefan and Norbert, have come every year from Germany for not the last 2 years, but for 10 years. So that is you can't just say take your birds and bugger off. You know, you want. So really, there's an awful lot. So I have taken a back seat with the show, and I showed a few years ago. go to the north of England and did quite well. But it is. If I was working and wasn't retired, I would still be showing as much as I did. It's just that, you know, you've got a wife who's retired, so it's the summer is tied with this massive garden and the birds, and then you can say, well, you're judging, you're showing, you've got visitors. By the time you finish, you can go to Bridlin for a week in January. So there has to be some compromise. I'm not one for compromising, but I do love showing. I love going. I would still go to the shows. I would still go to the north of England and the northwest and others, and yeah, and I love judging. It is the amount of time that's showing.
The preparation time.
It is. It isn't just the 3 or 4 days. It's the man hours to get that bird. Because these days, and even in the 87 and 88, and those, there was still over 1,000 birds there. And yeah, there was the Roy Foxes and the Tony Bells and the Jerry Northens and the John Orams and Scotland. There was Willie Turnbull. So there was still tough competition there. And I know it's tougher now, I think, but there was still 1,000 birds and some top quality exhibitors there, so you still to do the business to win even then. I'm sure it's harder now looking at the quality of the birds that are around and the numbers, you know. 55, 60, 70 in a class. That's tough to win. It's tough to get in the first 7.
Yeah.
Never mind win a show. Just and the Paul Larking. It's a brilliant idea, but it is making it a little bit slightly over competitive. When you used to go to a show like Willie Turnbull giving him that green cock, these days, I think people, maybe it's my age, are more competitive. There's a different atmosphere at the shows than there were 30, 40 years ago. It's all about winning. There isn't quite the camaraderie. Maybe I'm wrong. It just seems to me that people have an obsession with the winning, and that's all that counts. And yeah, there's more to the hobby than.
Yeah, there most definitely is. There most definitely is. And finally, Terry, if we can, somebody who, you know, thinking about taking up the hobby today. Because it's not an inexpensive hobby to set up.
Absolutely.
But the rewards are, I think, you know, huge. I still get a buzz, as I'm sure you do, when you see that first chip out of the season, and you know, you take yourself back to 1853, and it's like being back all over again. So, anyone starting up today, you know, what would you say to them? You've been in this hobby for 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, 1 or 2 years. I would say keep it simple, really. Just. Keep a nice small stud. Don't try and keep every colour under the sun. Just keep it nice and simple. Enjoy the hobby. One of my hobby horses, green food. Give them the green food. And also, I think I've been guilty of not spending enough time in there. I do at the moment because I have a bloody chair in there because of my false knees. But I think there's a tendency to go in, feed, and it becomes. It can become a bind if you aren't careful. So I think keep it simple and don't. I know people will contradict me and disagree, but you don't have to soak seed. You don't have to give hard-boiled egg. This sort of weather, they might go off. As I said to Matt earlier, they get EMP in the morning, just moisten with water, not too wet. Chunk of broccoli at lunchtime. I'll just give them now, and they'll get EMP. It's tea time. And if they're going to rear, they'll rear. They don't need these 54 different supplements. Some of these companies, I'm sure they do wonderful products, but you seem to get the idea. Unless you give all these things that every day, every week, you can't rear. A bird that's going to rear will rear on broccoli, EMP and EMP. If it doesn't, I don't want to know. Yeah. You know, I have bred hawfinches, I have bred grey wagtails, I have bred red starts. So if a canary won't rear on that, I'll go into budgies.
You heard it here first, people. You heard it here first. Terry, thank you for your immense hospitality. Thank you for taking the time out today to share it with us and the channel. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been a pleasure seeing you, Matt. It always is. You're one of the world's best. Lovely to see you.